Hi, I'm Amara, and when my mother slapped me at my own wedding, it wasn't just a public humiliation, it was her desperate attempt to erase my love for Malik, rewriting our story to fit her perfect image. They cut his family from the guest list, blurred him from our memories. But I seized the mic and unleashed a truth so raw it shattered their facade. Stay with me. This isn't just a wedding gone wrong. It's a rebellion against a family's betrayal that will grip your soul. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, though I'd be lying if I said my heart wasn't tight in my chest, but because I wanted a moment alone. The cathedral in Santa Barbara was glowing in the early evening light, casting fiery hues across the pews like a warning of the storm to come. Jada, my best friend since college, was crouched beside the aisle, fiddling with floral arrangements and whispering commands to the coordinator. She spotted me and waved. "You sure you want to see the setup before the crowd floods in?" she asked, brushing her braids back with one gloved hand. "You know how you obsess over every detail." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Better now than during the vows." She nodded. "Fair?" As I stepped further in, something about the seating struck me. The front row on the left, where Malik's family was supposed to sit, was empty. Not just empty, unlabeled. No name tags, no mother of the groom, no Uncle Marcus, nothing. In contrast, my side was neatly marked with place cards and white orchids. Selena, my mother, had clearly approved every detail. I turned to the planner. "Why isn't Malik's family up front?" She looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Oh, your mother said she adjusted the seating 2 days ago for symmetry." "Symmetry?" I repeated slowly. Jada appeared at my side, arms folded. "That's not an accident." I stared at the untouched pews, the absence of names, the void where his family should have been. I tried to breathe past the knot forming in my stomach. "They'll sit wherever they want," I said, forcing calm. "I'm sure someone will fix it." But nobody did. Later that evening, I slipped into the small room near the vestry to double-check the guest list. My gut had been uneasy all day, and I needed something concrete to shake the doubt or confirm it. Malik's fraternity brothers weren't on the RSVP sheet. Neither was his godmother, who helped raise him when his father passed. I called Darius, his closest friend. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," he said warmly, "wedding eve jitters? I'm just checking. You got our invite, right?" Silence. "I didn't get anything," he said finally. I assumed maybe it was just family tight list, didn't want to bug Malik about it. I thanked him, hung up, and stood there holding the phone like it had burned me. The list had been altered, tampered with, cut. That night, over dinner at my parents' house, I waited until the dishes were cleared before confronting my mother. "Why weren't Malik's people on the final list?" She didn't look up from her wine glass. "We had to make some cuts. Space was tight and we needed to be mindful of the look." "The look?" "You're defying our legacy with him," she said with a venomous edge. "It's not judgment, it's just reality. You want the photographs to be timeless, don't you?" My jaw tightened. "So you erased them?" Selena shrugged as if I'd questioned her choice of earrings. "Sometimes we do what's necessary for the greater picture." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, but all I did was stand and smile and say, "Excuse me," before walking out onto the porch, where the air felt a little more honest. The next morning, during rehearsal, I smiled like a pageant queen. My mother beamed at my silence. Guests complimented the floral arch. Malik kissed my cheek and whispered, "You okay?" And I nodded because what else could I say? Was I okay? Was I still me? Because somewhere between the guest list and the pews, something had started to split. I wasn't sure if it was my spine or my will. I remembered being 9, refusing to wear the blue dress Selena bought me for church. She told the neighbors I was going through a phase, said I'd grow out of it once I learned what being presentable meant. Apparently, I still hadn't learned. After rehearsal, as we packed up, my mother handed me a small box. "For tomorrow," she said, smiling that smile that never reached her eyes. Inside was a pearl pin. "A strong flower," she said. "Hard to train, but beautiful when it listens." I pressed my lips together. Took it, pinned it on, because if nothing else, I'd learned how to nod at the right time. But that night, as I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, I felt it, that quiet ache behind my ribs. Not sadness, not fear, but the first rip of something sacred. And I told myself I'd make it through the weekend, keep the peace. But somewhere deep down, I knew something sacred had already been taken. The morning of the wedding came, and as I stood in front of the mirror, wearing a dress I hadn't chosen, I realized my silence was being mistaken for consent. It should have been ivory satin. That was the dress I'd spent weeks designing with the boutique in Montecito. A cascade of elegance that danced with my spirit, with an open neckline and a subtle slit. A reflection of my fearless heart. That dress felt like me. But when I unzipped the garment bag that had just been delivered by the courier and peeled back the protective tissue, what stared back at me was nothing like what I had picked. It was white, pristine, lace from collar to cuff, with long sleeves and a neckline that came up so high it brushed the base of my throat. The silhouette was classic, conservative, even bridal magazine perfect for someone else. Jada's gasp said it before I could. "That's not the dress, eh?" "No," I muttered, running a hand across the embroidery like maybe just maybe it would turn into the dress I ordered if I touched it right. "It's not." She reached for her phone. "I'll call the boutique right now. They must have packed the wrong one. I checked mine first." Notifications lit up like a small fire. Near the top was a message from my mother, time-stamped at 7:15 a.m. "Trust me, this one is more respectable. It'll photograph beautifully." Respectable. That word hung in the air like humidity. Jada hovered, waiting for me to say something. I forced a breath, then shook my head. "Don't call. There's no time. And honestly, let's not start a war today." She blinked. "Amara, that's your dress. The one you paid for. The one you loved." I nodded, once, carefully. "I know." I stepped behind the folding screen and slid out of my robe. The lace scraped against my skin as I pulled the new dress on. Each tug a reminder I hadn't asked for this, but it fit. Of course it fit. It always does when it's planned that way. Jada helped zip the back. Her hands lingered as if pleading for me to fight back. I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I looked at myself in the mirror, tall, composed, elegant. But not me. A version of me that someone else had crafted. "It's beautiful," Jada said with a tremble. "But it's not yours." I nodded again. "Let's just get through the day." She didn't argue. She knew better than anyone that when I got quiet, I was in trouble. And deep down, I was already drowning. As we waited for the makeup artist to arrive, I sat by the window and watched the breeze move through the orange trees outside. I thought back to the time I almost left for Italy, a full scholarship, a year in Florence. I'd been packing my suitcase when my mother came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed like she was delivering bad news. "It's not that I don't believe in you," she'd said. "It's just things are safer when you stay close. You don't need to prove anything over there." I believed her. Or maybe I just didn't want to be the daughter who left. That was always the pattern. Anytime I reached for something bold, something mine, she softened it, shifted it, made it better, and I let her. Over and over again, I let her. "It's always been like this," I whispered to myself, a vow to break free. I stood up and walked back to the mirror. The light in the room had shifted now, morning becoming mid-morning, golden, warming into white. My reflection blinked back at me, regal but unfamiliar. The dress clung perfectly, like it had known my shape before I did. Jada glanced up from her phone. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I didn't answer, not with words. Instead, I reached for the pearl pin, still nestled where I'd left it beside the bouquet, and gently tucked it into my hair. "A symbol of strength," she'd said. "Hard to train, but beautiful when it listens." I adjusted the sleeves, smoothing the lace over my wrists like armor. No one could see the tremble underneath. That dress was never mine, and somewhere deep down, neither was this day. The whispers started before the ceremony even began. Smiles too wide, stares too long. like I was a guest at someone else's performance. Malik and I stood behind the heavy oak doors of the cathedral, waiting for the organ to begin. He kept tracing small circles on my hand with his thumb, like he could sense the storm behind my silence. I tried to focus on the rhythm of his breath, steady and calm, while mine hitched every few seconds beneath the corseted lace, pressing too tightly against my ribs. The murmur of voices drifted in through the cracked door. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, surgical. I recognized the tone before the words. I mean, she always had these little episodes. You know how some girls get starving for attention? The voice belonged to my father's sister, Aunt Vivian. Her words sliced like a hidden blade, but the poison was still there. The woman she was speaking to gasped, then laughed, that little stifled kind of laugh people use when they're pretending to be polite. Lord, I thought she grew out of that. Guess not. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. But inside, something cracked just slightly, like the first hairline fracture on a porcelain teacup. I wasn't sure where it would spread, but I knew it would. Beside me, Malik didn't seem to hear. Or maybe he did and chose not to react. Either way, he squeezed my hand again, firmer this time, and that was all that kept me from walking out the back door. The doors opened and the music began. We walked down the aisle slowly, as instructed. Step, pause, smile. Step, pause, smile. The dress tugged at my hips in places it shouldn't have. The heat of the lights bored down from the rafters above. Every pew I passed held familiar faces. Family, friends, church elders, sorority alumni from my mother's glory days. Their expressions were painted in practiced admiration, but none of them looked at me. Not really. They looked through me, like I was the envelope. Malik was the message. Halfway down the aisle, I caught sight of my Aunt Nora, leaning in toward a neighbor in the fourth pew. Her lips barely moved, but the side glance she gave me afterward was enough to confirm she wasn't whispering compliments. She turned her head just as our eyes met, feigning interest in her program. I kept walking. It wasn't the first time I'd been the subject of a hushed aside. At 18, I'd fallen headfirst into painting. I saved every cent from waitressing, bought a second-hand easel, and spent nights teaching myself how to blend colors. When a travel grant to Paris came through, I nearly cried from excitement. That was the same night my mother poured us both a glass of wine and sat me down like we were girlfriends sharing gossip. "You're talented," she began, "but don't you think it's a bit impulsive? You'll outgrow this art nonsense, and you've already been accepted to that business program at UCLA. That's solid, real," she said it with a smile. Always with the smile. That night, I declined the scholarship. That was the pattern. What I wanted was always a phase, a romantic detour, something cute I'd eventually move past. The only parts of me that seemed permanent in her eyes were the ones that looked like her. Back in the cathedral, I tried to breathe through the thick fabric at my chest. Malik leaned closer and whispered, "You're doing amazing." I nodded, but I wasn't. As the officiant welcomed everyone, I glanced toward the front pew. My mother sat tall, spine straight, shoulders pulled back, a puppeteer orchestrating my submission. When her eyes found mine, she gave the slightest nod, not warm, not proud, approving, like she was checking off a box. Like the dress, the seating, the silence, this moment was unfolding exactly as she'd planned. And that's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't loud, no lightning bolt, no movie moment. Just the quiet realization that I had let myself be arranged into something palatable again. And somehow, Malik still didn't see it. He squeezed my hand once more. I didn't squeeze back. I wasn't angry at him. Not yet. But part of me was beginning to wonder if he knew the cost of this wedding and not in dollars. She thought she could cage my spirit. She had no idea she was the one I was outgrowing. The moment the ceremony ended, I thought maybe the worst had passed, that I had survived the sharpest edge of their disapproval, cloaked in pleasantries. But I underestimated how public shame could wear a smile, and how my father knew exactly how to turn a toast into a warning. After the photos and small talk with distant relatives and coworkers I'd never met, we finally sat down for dinner at the reception. The ballroom was bathed in candlelight and crystal reflections. The table settings were flawless, of course, because my mother oversaw every fork and flower. A soft instrumental version of Unchained Melody played from a string quartet in the corner. The air was warm with champagne and expectation. Then the MC tapped the mic, and now she beamed. To begin our evening of celebration, we invite the father of the bride, Mr. Clarence Tate, for the first family toast. My father rose, slow and deliberate. He adjusted his cufflinks as if ready to pass judgment. A few guests clapped. I didn't. I already knew this wasn't a toast. It was a verdict. He took the mic, cleared his throat gently, and began. I remember when Amata used to draw gardens. Big ones. Yellow flags, birds with wings. He chuckled. She'd say, "Daddy, one day I'm going to live in one and rule it like a queen." Some laughter floated across the room. Malik smiled politely beside me. My hand stayed still on my lap. She was always imaginative, strong-willed, never liked rules. We used to joke. She was the child who needed the most guidance and gave us the most gray hairs. That earned a few chuckles, but I caught Jada across the room, narrowing her eyes. She knew where this was going. My father kept going. Now, we didn't always understand her choices, and there were times we worried, as parents do. But love means staying, even when it's hard, even when your child forgets who they are. A stillness crept into the room, and sometimes, he said, looking directly at me now, we love hardest when our children lose their way. We don't abandon them, we stand by. That's what family does. My mouth dried. I felt my shoulders tighten so hard I could barely breathe. My jaw was locked in a frozen smile, my eyes fixed on the linen napkin in my lap. Malik leaned toward me. "Do you want to say something?" I shook my head slightly. "Not here. Not yet." My phone buzzed gently on the table. I glanced down. "Jada, you want me to tackle him or wait till dessert?" A tiny laugh puffed out of me involuntarily. It barely made it past my lips, but it cracked something in me, just for a second. I glanced up and caught my father returning to his seat, satisfied. This wasn't his first performance. I flashed back to senior year, the school awards banquet. I had won a grant for a summer arts intensive. They called me up to the podium and handed me the certificate. My heart was pounding with pride. When I sat back down, my mother turned to the group of PTA mothers around us and smiled brightly. We really had to push her. She's so stubborn. But we guide her well. It had been like that all my life. Any success I earned became proof of their parenting. Any deviation became a crisis. Their speeches were never about me, they were about them. Back in the ballroom, the guests had moved on. Waiters refilled glasses, the string quartet shifted to a waltz, and the moment passed as if their words hadn't left scars. But I felt it deep. I turned to Malik and whispered, "He didn't raise a daughter. He raised a warning." Malik blinked. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer right away. I took my fork and pushed a piece of carrot around the plate. Then I looked up and met his eyes. I'm done being their puppet. I held it together until dessert, smiled through the toasts, nodded at the half-hearted congratulations, even kissed my uncle's cheek when he leaned in and whispered, "Don't mind your father. He's just old school." But that moment, what came after, burned everything clean. We were standing near the cake table, a 6-tier tower of fondant and sugar flowers, too extravagant for my taste, but exactly what my mother had insisted on. She called it timeless. I called it another thing that had nothing to do with me. The music had softened into some instrumental jazz standard as the photographer gave the nod. Malik and I stood poised for the knife, all eyes on us. I cut a slice with steady hands and turned to look for her. "Selena!" She was seated at the end of the head table, surrounded by her friends. They were laughing at something on her phone, sipping white wine. I walked over, cake plate in hand, deciding, for reasons I still don't fully understand, to offer her the first piece. Maybe it was habit, maybe hope. Maybe I thought this tiny act of goodwill would say, "I'm still your daughter even now." She stood before I could speak, took a step forward, leaned in as if to whisper something kind, something private, something motherly. Instead, Her hand rose and came down with a crack across my face. The sound, it wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to pull oxygen from the room. "You're a disgrace to our name," she hissed. My skin stung instantly, but it was the silence that followed that tore into me. No music, no clinking glasses, no muttering or moving, just stunned stillness. I could feel every eye on me, every fork suspended midair. Malik moved toward us, his body tense like he was about to intervene, but I lifted my hand slightly, stopping him. My mother didn't even look shaken. She stood composed, adjusting her necklace like nothing had happened. My father remained seated, his gaze dropped to his plate. My sister, Kiara, sipped her champagne and looked off to the side like she hadn't seen a thing. Even Jada, sweet Jada, her mouth agape, froze in place. She didn't move. No one did. It was as if my mother had flipped a switch that suspended reality, turned the room into a museum of statues. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My right cheek burned, but shame licked through my chest like wildfire. I stepped back just one pace. Then, I looked up. Somewhere near the corner of the room, I saw my young cousin Elijah, barely 14, phone in hand, filming out of reflex like all teenagers do. His eyes were wide. I wondered if he even understood what he'd captured. And I didn't say a word, not yet, but inside, something crumbled, something ancient. A crack I had spent decades covering with education, etiquette, awards, silence. It gave way to a memory. Me at 13, sitting in the back seat of our minivan, still in my Sunday dress, shaking with rage. I had stood up in youth group after a friend, Talia, had been mocked for her lokes. I'd told the boys it was racist, told the teacher, told the pastor. We got home and my mother pulled me aside. "You're shaming our family with your outbursts," she snapped. "Learn to hold your tongue." That night, I went to bed wondering what made her so afraid of being seen, of making noise, of standing beside anyone who didn't match her idea of acceptability. And now, all these years later, in front of all her friends and every table we'd paid $250, 0 cents a head for, she'd made a scene bigger than anything I ever had. That slap, sharp, swift, wasn't about this day. It had been building since the first time I used my voice, and she told me to hush since every "you'll understand when you're older" and every "you're just being dramatic." And I realized then this wasn't about me embarrassing her. This was about me existing in a way she never could control. She thought she'd break me, but it was the last time I let her write my story. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the flowers began to wilt under the weight of their hypocrisy, I sat barefoot on the edge of our hotel bed, staring at my phone. My cheek still tingled from the slap. Not from pain, but from the memory. From how calmly she did it, how nobody rushed in, how I had to walk back to my seat with a fractured dignity no one dared acknowledge. Malik was in the shower. I could hear the water steady and unchanging as if it could wash away their betrayal. That's when Jada's message came through. "Watch this. They posted it to the wedding drive already. Thought you should see it first." I opened the video. Our so-called couples montage, a highlight reel of our journey put together by the media team my mother had hand-selected. Music played softly under slow-motion clips of our engagement party, family barbecues, vacations. But something felt wrong, off, too polished. Then I saw it. Malik in frame, then gone. In scene after scene, his face was turned away, blurred, or cropped out entirely. At first, I thought it was coincidence, maybe a technical mistake, but then it became obvious. At our beach trip in Ventura, just my hair catching wind in the frame. At Christmas, me passing a dish but only half his arm visible. At my graduation, no Malik at all. Even though I remember he held the camera, I watched it twice, 3 times. "It looks like you married yourself," Jada texted again. I didn't respond. Instead, I scrolled to the next clip. Our thank you speech, or what should have been. The video opened with a panoramic shot of the ballroom. My lips were moving, but the voice wasn't mine. It was Selena's. "We're proud of our daughter who's come full circle. With the support of her family, she's made a wise and meaningful choice. My hands went cold. They'd taken my moment, our moment, and rewritten it. My words gone, my tone erased. My truth replaced with hers with that syrupy poison she always used to sound warm while cutting you off at the knees. I hit pause, my reflection stared back at me in the black screen. That dress I hadn't chosen, that pin she'd placed in my hair. Malik stepped out of the bathroom in sweatpants, towel over his shoulder. His smile faded the moment he saw my face. "What happened?" I showed him the videos. He didn't speak for a long time. "I don't even know what to say," he muttered. "This isn't just about me," I said, voice low. "They didn't just erase you. They erased truth." He came closer, sat beside me. I didn't lean in. "I'm sorry," he said. "You didn't do this," I replied. Silence again. I stood and walked to the desk, pulled my laptop from the bag, logged in, opened a blank document. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Jada's voice echoed from earlier that afternoon after the slap when she caught me alone behind the catering tent and said, "They've been rewriting you for years. Maybe it's time you edit them out." So I began. I typed every detail I could remember. The invitation list edits, the dress swap, the missing montage, the speech replacement, the slap. Not to expose. Not yet. To document. To make it real. To take ownership. Somewhere around 3:00 a.m., I paused and noticed the pearl pin still in my hair. I reached up, slowly, unfastened it, studied it in my palm, a fragile lie of control. I set it down beside my laptop. The desk lamp caught it just right. It cast a crooked shadow, a symbol that had meant obedience. Now, just decoration. Nothing more. My reflection in the dark window met my eyes. If they wanted to erase me, they underestimated my voice. The next morning I didn't scream. I didn't lash out. I just buttoned my dress with slow, deliberate hands and packed my voice like a blade. The brunch was held at the same church social hall where I used to attend youth choir practice. The room hadn't changed much. Same dusty blinds, same cross above the old piano, but everything inside me had shifted. Malik was quiet as he drove us there. His fingers rested on the steering wheel as if bracing for the fallout. When we walked in, people smiled like nothing had happened. Not the slap, not the edit, not the ceremony that had unraveled in plain sight. I greeted politely, sat where I was told, and buttered a piece of dry toast while someone prayed over eggs and forgiveness. Then Zoe came up to me, my niece, barely 7 years old, still in a ruffled purple dress and jelly shoes that squeaked. "Auntie?" she asked, tilting her head. I turned. "Yes, sweetheart." Her eyes were wide, innocent, honest, in the way only children are. "Well, did Grandma say your husband was just for attention?" The toast stopped in my throat. "Did she say that yesterday?" Zoe nodded. "Yeah, before she hit you. She said it with a cruelty only adults wield. No judgment, just fact." I looked up. Malik had stopped mid-chew. Jada's fork was frozen in mid-air. Across the room, my mother was laughing at something someone said, like none of this had ever existed. The MC cleared his throat and stepped up to the mic. "Before we close out this lovely weekend, we'd love to open the floor to any family members who'd like to share a few words." Selena stood, patting her hair and smoothing her skirt. That was my cue. I rose before she could take another step. Malik glanced at me. His hand brushed the small of my back, not to stop me, but as a silent promise. Then he let go. I walked to the front, my heels tapping sharp against the tile floor. Every tap felt like peeling back another layer I didn't need anymore. The mic was warm. Someone had just used it. I held it steady. "I was told to stay silent," I began, voice calm, not cold, "to keep the peace, to be the kind of daughter who knows her place. But there is no peace in being erased." No one moved. I scanned the room. This weekend wasn't just a wedding, it was a history, a pattern of edits, omissions, and performance dressed up as prop. Someone shifted in their seat. In the montage, my husband disappeared. In the speech, my voice vanished. And when I stepped forward with kindness, I was met with a hand instead of an embrace. The DJ cut the background music. It faded to silence. Jada from the back held her phone up. She wasn't hiding it, she was live. I met my mother's eyes. This isn't about a dress or a man or even yesterday. It's about pretending that control is care and silence is love. And I'm done pretending. I inhaled. Let it sit. A woman near the coffee table whispered, "My God!" "I forgive you," I said, "but I no longer follow you." No one clapped. I didn't expect them to. I placed the mic back on its stand. Not dropped, not thrown, just returned. Then I turned. Malik was already standing. We didn't storm out. We walked head high together. Sunlight caught my face when we stepped outside, warm, unfiltered, honest. The world heard my truth, and their lies began to crumble. By Tuesday morning, my phone was on fire. Texts from coworkers, voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize, comments flooding every photo I'd ever posted that still had its comment section open. I stared at the screen as if it might calm down if I just blinked slower. Malik brought me coffee and didn't say a word. He placed the cup next to me on the kitchen counter, his hand resting for a second on the back of my shoulder. That one touch was louder than anything anyone else had said all morning. The video, my speech, my mother's slap, had been clipped, shared, and spun across every platform. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, even LinkedIn. Some people praised me. Daughter speaks her truth at wedding brunch, breaking generational trauma in real time, but others weren't so kind. Disrespectful, self-centered, she ruined a sacred event for attention. My workplace, a local nonprofit where I'd run youth mentorship programs for the past 5 years, sent me a gentle, professionally worded email. "We understand emotions are running high right now. Perhaps it's best if you take a few personal days until things settle." Settle as if their betrayal could ever fade. That evening, I sat on the couch next to Malik, scrolling through my inbox. That's when I saw it. The statement. Delina had posted it across every platform she knew, church bulletins, the neighborhood HOA Facebook page, even the alumni group of her old college. "We love our daughter," it began, "but she is clearly going through a difficult season. We are heartbroken that such a sacred day turned into a public outburst that deeply hurt our family." Attached to the post was a selectively edited video. No audio from my speech, just me walking away. The slap gone, the context gone. What was left looked like I had stood up, thrown a tantrum, and stormed out. I turned to Malik, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're making me look unhinged." He nodded slowly. "It's deliberate. They're rewriting history to save face." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat still. My inbox was a war zone. "You should be ashamed of yourself. You humiliated your father in public. Honor thy mother and father. God doesn't bless rebellion." Mixed in were verses, psalms, prayers. I got one message from an elder at our old church that simply read, "You've brought shame on us all." By Friday, I hadn't left the house. I hadn't changed out of sweatpants. I watched the numbers rise on the video and felt like I was sinking into a version of myself I barely recognized. Malik suggested a trip. We could go somewhere quiet for a few days, reset. But Jada called that night. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She just said, "You've ignited a fire. Don't let them snuff it out." I didn't sleep much after that. I kept pacing, thinking, going over it all in my head. And then something unexpected happened. I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Brianna, a student I'd mentored during my first year at the nonprofit. I remembered her vividly. Bright, stubborn, constantly told she wasn't polished enough for college interviews. She asked if we could meet. We met at a small coffee shop near her new apartment. She'd grown into herself, tall, confident, with thick braids and a steady gaze. "I watched your video," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "I watched it 5 times. I waited," she continued. "Do you remember the day I almost quit? Back when that guidance counselor told me I didn't fit the mold. I remember. You told me to stop waiting for permission. You said they're not looking for you to succeed. They're looking for you to behave. Don't give them either." I smiled. "Well," she said, leaning in, "watching you up there, calm and clear, it gave me the courage to fight my own battles." I sat in silence, the weight of her words pressing on something inside me I hadn't even realized was aching. When I got home, I didn't speak to anyone. I walked to my laptop, opened a new document, title My Version. I began typing everything from the missing guest list to the slap to the statement. I wasn't sure if I'd publish it. Not yet, but for the first time in a long while I felt something stir. Not rage, not shame, clarity. They tried to erase me again, but this time, the pen is mine. 3 weeks later, I stood once again at the front of the same church, not in a wedding dress, not in white lace. This time I wore charcoal. Simple, grounded, deliberate. No makeup, no frills, no pearl pin, just me and the voice they'd spent a lifetime trying to soften. The sanctuary looked different now, though the pews hadn't moved. Maybe it was the air, charged with a kind of quiet tension that always comes before a truth someone's been trying to avoid. The church had organized a community dialogue in response to the fallout. They framed it around healing and family reconciliation, but we all knew why the room was full. Because something had cracked wide open, and now people wanted to know what was inside. I hadn't been invited by the church elders. I had been invited by a small coalition of local Black therapists, professors, mothers, people who had seen that clip, heard my words, and said, "Enough." I walked to the front alone, no music this time, just my heels tapping softly against the stone floor. There were familiar faces in the crowd, neighbors, family, friends, old teachers. A few avoided my eyes, a few nodded. My parents didn't come. Neither did my sister, but their absence didn't leave a void. It made space. I stepped to the microphone and waited for the hush to settle. My mother raised me to keep things inside. I began to smile when I wanted to scream, to say it's okay when it wasn't. To protect the family image at all costs. I paused. The room was holding its breath. But I've learned something. Silence doesn't protect love. It buries it. There were no interruptions. No one coughed. No one shifted. I continued. We're taught that obedience is love, that loyalty means invisibility, that control is a form of care. But what happens when the family image we're preserving erases the people inside it? I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I told the truth. I spoke about how the edited footage was just the latest in a long line of revisions, not a video, but of me. How they had slowly shaped me into something more digestible, quieter, paler, less bold, and how at some point I stopped recognizing the version of myself they were proud of. I let the silence land before I finished. We don't heal by pretending everything is fine. We heal by facing what was broken, and sometimes walking away is the only honest step left. When I stepped down, no one clapped. That wasn't the mood. But one by one, people began to stand. A man who'd once served as my Sunday school teacher walked over and hugged me tight. "You've shown us what courage looks like," he said softly. "We failed you." The church newsletter released a formal apology a week later, quiet, tucked away like a guilty secret, but it was there. They apologized for sharing a partial and biased account of recent events. It wasn't much, but it was something. That weekend, I returned to my childhood home to pack the last of my things. I had been meaning to for weeks, but this time, I needed closure. The bedroom still smelled faintly of jasmine, my grandmother's old perfume. As I boxed up old books and folded away high school sweatshirts, I opened a jewelry box I hadn't touched in years. Inside, tucked beneath a pair of earrings, was a note. My grandmother's handwriting, sharp, no nonsense, a little slanted to my fire and spirit. Never let anyone make you smaller than you are. Not even the ones who love you. I sat with that note for a long time. Before I left, I walked over to the bed, pulled out the pearl pin my mother had once placed so proudly in my hair, and laid it down on the quilt. No drama, no final word, just release. I didn't take it with me because it didn't belong with who I was becoming. My truth set me free, but the cost was a family I no longer know. I carry their absence like a shadow, rebuilding myself with every step, knowing some wounds heal only in solitude.